Hello, and welcome to the Social Psychic Radio Show featuring Jason Zook. In uncertain times, we must change our focus and priorities. This show will highlight social justice issues with the goal of expanding minds and increasing unity, love, and mutual respect for ourselves and our planet. We support the Black Lives Matter movement. Our show aspires to promote social spirituality, which simply means that by coming together, we can solve any of our problems, including the goal of bringing an end to all forms of hate, discrimination, bias, or oppression. We must protect our environment, reform our criminal justice system, and protect every citizen from police brutality. When we come together, it becomes possible to bridge the gaps that plague our society and divide us from within. We the people means everyone.
Hello and welcome to the Social Psychic Radio Show. It's Jason Zook. It's with great pleasure I have the opportunity of presenting special guest Zen Benefiel to the show today. And I'm just so excited to have Zen on the show because for me, it's so important that we look at the big issues of life. And some of those issues involve having the ability of understanding where we came from. Why are we here? What's our purpose? Are we the only intelligent life in the universe? I know that there's a lot of series of questions like that we always contemplate within ourselves regularly. And I'm just so excited to have Zen come and talk about this stuff because he's lived his entire life dedicated to trying to get to the heart of these issues and trying to figure out exactly what we're about, what our purpose is, and where we're headed. So without any further delay, it's a great pleasure I welcome Zen to the show. Welcome to the show, Zen. How are you?
Well, thanks, Jason. What a great introduction, man. Great to be here.
You know, when we started talking last week before we did the interview today, I have to say I was fascinated by the conversation we had then. I feel like we could have recorded that and made that a prior episode.
Indeed.
Based on the flow of the information and the exchange of stuff that just happened to go back and forth. And before we start, I'll just tell you
let me add to that a little bit. You're a pretty sharp guy, Jason.
Thank you.
Right. Okay.
I appreciate that. I want to tell you outright that I do believe in UFOs. I believe that we have been visited regularly, and I've actually had the experience myself of witnessing my own UFO twice so far. One time I was actually stargazing with my best friend Megan in Tampa, outside of Tampa here about 2 or 3 years ago. And I got to see a UFO do 390-degree angles in the air, midair, did 390-degree angles. And it amazed me to see that firsthand. I was actually like one of those surreal moments, like, is this really happening to me right now? Is this really happening? I can't believe it.
Oh, isn't that, when you witness something and you know it's from an unknown source and yet here it is and you're watching it and it just creates this almost an effervescent feeling inside.
Yes.
Right? That awe.
And it's amazing to go through that and experience that. It's a really amazing thing. And so starting on our interview today, I want to ask you, and I know you're going to probably laugh when I ask this question. Are we alone?
You're right. I will. No, haven't been. Don't know that we ever were. We just weren't aware of it. I had a great friend. It just came to mind that as you were talking that he was a United Methodist minister, actually. His name was Milton Nothdurft. And I met him here in Arizona, and a great guy. He was actually at the original contactee group that Brad Steiger was part of in the Midwest. And what was interesting is that, of course, Milton being a minister, he'd gone through the Bible and found all the references to UFOs and actually wrote a book about them. And he traveled around the country, had all kinds of photographs from different people that he showed me that were just amazing, right? Stuff that you wouldn't see. And I have to say that I have been so fortunate, and it's got to be some kind of quantum entanglement that I live in that brings me into the presence of these different people who have these things and shared experiences and things that we can talk about. Especially, for me, it started really young. And I was set up, people talk about, well, is there fate, is there destiny, or, Is it all free will? Is it just coincidence or synchronicity and blah, blah, blah? From my experience, we're set up. We just don't realize it. And when you acquiesce to that, or you keep asking the questions to dig deep and find out more, the more apparent it becomes. I was orphaned at birth and then adopted early. And then almost 4.5 years later, my adoptive sister comes along. And so my parents decide that it's time to tell me that I was adopted, right? Because there was no segue in between. And bless her heart, I love my sister. So that when they told me, it gave me, even that young, I started questioning, why? What happened to my real parents? Do I have parents above? Right. And because I was attending Sunday school, we were actually members of the United Methodist Church at that time, speaking of. So having those kinds of questions and things really started me off right, I suppose. About, maybe 3 months after that, I'm standing on the landing of we've got a 2-story house in rural town, Midwest. And I'm looking out over the window that looks over the front porch. It's dark. And I've got my hands in my chins waiting for my dad to come home from the store. All of a sudden, I hear this big booming voice. I still can't go that deep. It says, "Hey, you." And rather than engage it, I wasn't frightened, right? I spun around to see if my mother heard it. And I asked her, I said, "Mom, you have a voice?" She goes, "No, what voice?" I said, "That voice says, 'Hey, you.'" She goes, "No." The typical parent brush off, right? Must have been a peeping Tom or something like that. And I knew I heard it. And so there was something else. Then from that point on, I started standing in front of windows at night with the lights on inside because you can't see out. And this is how I dealt with the fear of the unknown. And I projected that, "Hey, you," out telepathically, and I'd stand there and wait for it to come back. And it took me a while to get centered, right? To not have my mind thinking about, well, when's it going to come back? And, all the impatient stuff that a kid goes through. It eventually did. So I started this exchange energetically and learned that, wow, there's nothing to fear out there. It's all cool, right? And so then a few years later, we moved into another house. I'd had a bunch of out-of-body experiences. And then one night I wake up in the corner of my bedroom looking at my physical body in bed, and I watch it get up, open my window, climb out. And so I, go through the wall, and I walk across the neighbor's backyard to this 10-acre pasture that had the fence around it. And I climb the fence, and I'm walking out into the field, and I start to rise up into the air. And I look up in the air, and I see this huge orange cigar-shaped cloud that's got to be at least a half mile long. And so I'm watching myself rise up. And then as I get closer to the cloud and start to go into it, the part of me that's observing everything unites with my body, and I go into the cloud, and I wake up in bed the next morning. And I couldn't wait to go back. I felt like, this was a family I hadn't known, and I felt so alive and just couldn't wait to go back. Well, those kinds of experiences happened for a couple of years, about once, maybe twice a month. And I would still not, I'd wake up, couldn't wait to go back. Sometimes I'd wake up with nosebleeds. And it was just, didn't think about it being a UFO at the time. That wasn't until I was 23, getting ready to move to Phoenix, and I'm walking through a bookstore in Muncie, Indiana, and this book falls off the shelf in front of me, and probably 10, 12 feet in front of me. Nobody else around. And so I walk over. And
so convenient, right? It just happens to fall right there.
It's like, okay, here it is, pluck. And this is how stuff works, right? Because everything's space, and when you know how to work with it, you can move matter. And so the folks from up there have a greater idea of how to move matter than we do. And so they kind of place things in our path. Well, this book turned out to be, I walked over and picked it up. It was Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. And I'm like, interesting. So I turned it over to the page that was open, and the first paragraph paraphrased said the most common contactee experiences in the Midwest during the late 50s and early 60s was the orange cigar-shaped cloud. Right. And so at that point, I went, whoa.
What year is this?
That was 1981.
Okay. I just want to know context in your life for where you are, because I know you've done amazing things, and
So yeah, I mean, time and date stamps, right? There was another event that happened in between that where I was in college at Ball State University, also in Muncie, and I hit my knees and I prayed to know what truth was. I was really in this tumultuous state, first year in college. I was in the pre-med program and I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I hit my knees and I asked to know what truth was. Now, truth to me was understanding my form, fit, and function in the world to some degree, right? So following week, I come back from class on Tuesday afternoon. It was November 11th, 1975. And I do the obligatory bong hit and album side meditation, right? It was the 70s, right? So certainly not enough to have affected me in a way to where I would hallucinate. However, I was listening to Journey's first album, and in between the vocals and the vamp, this voice that I established communication with asked me by name, "Are you willing to die for what you believe in?" And I just, for a moment, just clamped shut. And then I was like, wait a minute. Okay. Christ consciousness feels a little empty. Didn't question it. And I went on to cosmic consciousness. And I said, yes, because it felt full. And at that point, the guitar riff comes up. I leave my body. I feel a tug at my solar plexus. And I turn to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed and turn back to look where I'm going. And I'm immediately engulfed by white light. The purest, this effervescent, iridescent, really high-pitched sensation. And I could also still think because I was analyzing things as I went. So I knew I was thinking and therefore could not be dead. So stayed there for a little bit, got bored because all it was white light, asked if there was more, went into a sphere of pinpoint.
You got bored of a near-death experience? I've never heard anyone say that before.
Well, consider I was 18 years old, right?
Yeah,
and I had plenty of inner experiences, and this was just pure white light. There was nothing else there, right? There was no other visuals or things to engage, and I knew I could think. I knew there was something there, and so I asked if there was more, something that I might be able to see and engage, right? So I feel a slight movement, and I'm in this indigo background with points of light around me. And I know the points of light are points of consciousness, but whether in body or not, I'm not sure because I know I'm not. And then the voice picks back up again and says, these are those that you're to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Understatement. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And on the allow, I felt another rush of energy and I'm back in my body, taking a gulp of air. Well, the one thing that I took away from that initially was that we are cosmic consciousness condensed into form, right? Didn't know exactly how it all worked or, all the mechanisms and the wherefore, whereas and wherefore alls and where art thou's. And yet it was undeniable, right? So my questions out of that were how, what do I need to do to prepare? And how can I explain this to others? Because I don't want to give the impression that I'm the one, because that's not what it was about. I was to help facilitate, right? And unfortunately, whenever I shared that experience, people didn't hear facilitate. They just thought I was some whacked out kid on drugs, right? Fortunately, I had a psychologist my parents sent me to that after the third visit, he says, you're not crazy. You've had a spiritual awakening from what I can tell. Why so young? I don't know. Most people don't go through it till the mid 40s if they ever do. My advice to you is just don't talk to anybody.
You know what? It's interesting when you say spiritual awakening, that there's actually a psychologist you worked with, a counselor who identified it as such, because most would not.
What a guy. I told you.
Right? I mean,
set up. All the way, because a year and a half later, I hadn't kept my mouth shut and I did some really silly, stupid things, bought a set of drums and had to move out of the dorm, found a house to live, didn't tell my parents, middle of winter, no heat, no running water, deplorable conditions. I was just stupid for doing it all, but yet I did it. And so one night, one morning I woke up 77 below zero. I hitchhiked into the school. That night, I didn't have any way to get back home because my car had been ran off the road, so it was unavailable. And knocked on a frat house door. Now, I had long hair and a beard. Frat houses generally have a bunch of jocks, short hairs, academic types, if that. And what was weird is that friend opened the door. I was a guy that I had statistics class with. And, he says, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just looking for a place to stay warm for the night, right? And then I'll figure shit out in the morning." And so I went in and was there for a few hours. Then another guy saw me and didn't like me and physically accosted me. So I got beat up. Campus police was called. I ended up in the hospital. My dad showed up, and then instead of taking me home, he says, "No, I think you ought to stay here for a little bit." And I'm like, possible concussion, right? Blow to the head, because it was hard. And I figured, overnight observation. Yeah, I'm cool with that. Then two orderlies walk up, escort me to the elevator, take me up to the 7th floor. And this large black guy, stands up from a chair he was sitting in and grabs a wad of keys off his belt and says, "Oh, got another one for me, huh?" And at that point, I realized, oops, here's the psych ward.
Oh, wow.
So I was there for 6 weeks, and they had me on 2,000 micrograms of Thorazine a day.
Wow.
I was.
How did you get out of that situation? Like, what got you through that?
Well, eventually I told the doc what he wanted to hear. I stopped trying to talk about my honest truth.
Reality.
Yeah. So 3 weeks in, I told him what he wanted to hear, and all of a sudden, miracle cure. And they started weaning me off the Thorazine. Now, I never spent time as a lump in the corner, which is what that kind of dosage should have done. I was up playing ping pong. So they couldn't figure out,
What did you learn during that period of time when you were going through that experience? What did you learn from it?
Well, a few things, but be careful who you talk to and what you say. I also learned that there were others there in similar situations that I had so much compassion for because they didn't deserve to be there. They were having the same kind of experience as I was, didn't know how to deal with it. And this is a Midwest. There's nothing around, no one, no guides, no metaphysicians at the time, right? And the clinical psychology side of things, or psychiatry, were all DSM-4 oriented, which is the manual that they use for diagnosis, right? They look up all the symptoms. And I was labeled as a manic depressive paranoid schizophrenic.
Those are labels that are, debilitating for people to live with in this.
Well, yeah. Why would you want to label somebody like that? And I found out, I wasn't, honestly.
When you hear those labels, that's why mental health awareness is so important for me with my show, because I feel like people need to understand that when you deal with mental health issues, it's just like having diabetes or having some type of a physical condition of the body. And I know that our experts don't understand spirituality within the context of mental health. So when someone experiences, I think when someone experiences a spiritual awakening, for example, I had a guest on my show 2 years ago that talked about a spiritual awakening he had where his wife did actually get him committed to an institution, and he had to get himself out of it because it's the line between a spiritual awakening for somebody and when you look at it from the DSM-4 kind of point of view, I believe that most people have spiritual awakenings will probably fall on that spectrum on some level to be diagnosed with some kind of
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely, because from their perspective, right, they're looking through that lens.
Yes, I know.
It's a very narrow lens. And so all of the things, when you're excited and you have all these things going on, you're going to appear to be manic, right? And you're not really. You've just got this excitement that's bubbling up inside of you that you don't know what to do with. And so you try to share it with people and you seem manic about it because you're so excited.
So excited. You found out something.
It's so shareable, right? Or ought to be, right? So you're right, and it depends on the lens and whether it's disorder or dad order, it's order. And there's a different one that's available, a lens that you can look through today, especially with all the things that have taken place and the rise in the, I don't know whether you want to call it new age stuff or not. That's probably the most common label.
Yes.
It honors those kinds of experiences. And there are many worlds that even here on the earth, there are many worlds, right? Now, even out there, there are, when you consider the electromagnetic spectrum, there's already the beta, theta, delta, gamma brain waves and radio waves and all those kinds of things that are noted throughout that electromagnetic spectrum. Well, what if each one of those sets of bandwidth, if you will, had a purpose, had a consciousness, had a direction, or even had beings inhabiting it, right? That had risen to those levels of consciousness where they were what we might call ascended masters, right? Whether they're ETs or ascended masters, they reach the consciousness and the awareness where they know that nothingness, which is what Wilbert Smith said was their basis. Wilbert Smith was the director for project management, which was Canada's UFO investigation program in the 1950s. He actually had contact and wrote about it. And one of the things they said was, we don't understand nothingness, right? And so when you understand that, that's nothingness, right? You create from that place.
Interesting.
Your awareness produces your reality.
Fill in the blanks.
I'm sorry?
Your awareness fills in the blanks for you, basically.
Right.
How I see it.
And as you ask questions, you gain awareness, right? Because you understand it. And today, even quantum physics is echoing what many have called living in spirit, right? Because it includes all the synchronicities and the contacts and the quantum entanglement that we live in. That's our awareness, the oneness. And so there's many aspects of that. It doesn't necessarily change the division of labor on the planet, right? Because we still need stuff done.
Yes.
That just it imbues it with a different awareness and reverence for the life that we are living and the sharing of our planet and others, right? And we just haven't got that yet.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to ask you this.
Please interrupt.
Out of curiosity, I know you have a wealth of broad experience with this. You've made it your lifelong passion. And so there might be people listening in the audience right now that they think of UFOs, they'll watch, Ancient Aliens, they'll put on like South Park and see some crazy, anecdote about alien life, or most of us have a pop culture point of reference, non exact. And here's a silly question I'll ask. I want you to entertain for a minute for our audience. Based on your knowledge of intelligent life in the universe that isn't us, right? Would you, if you were to use a pop culture reference, would you think that there's more people like more intelligent life like E.T. the movie, Men in Black the movie, or Independence Day? Do you think they're here to destroy us, work with us, or help us?
Oh, they're definitely here to destroy us. And I don't know that any of those three references would really do justice.
Okay. That's what I want to ask you is what is your perception of this compared to, say, someone who's immersed in
what's Arrival? I think Arrival would be more fitting, because when you understand the laws of the universe, which is what it takes in order to travel the stars or dimensions or whatever it is, there is no way you can be malevolent. Just absolutely no way. Now, we don't understand that.
I love to hear that from you, though. That's reassuring.
And it also sounds insane to most people because they're steeped in the polarity consciousness.
I am not steeped in that. So that's why I love to hear that, because to me, that makes sense. It makes sense that if you're going to evolve to the point where you can cross the spectrum and go from one universe to, from one side of the universe to the other, I would hope that if you evolve on that level, then spiritually you've evolved where you don't look at competition and conquest as your modus operandi, right?
No, it's more about collaboration at that point.
Collaboration and probably wanting to change things for the universe for good for all, be a force of good.
And free will is not affected. So in other words, there's a bunch of planets out there just like us that have people still warring and they don't understand how to share a planet, or that the planet actually has its own consciousness and is part of a network of conscious planetary bodies.
Where do we fall on that?
Right? Well, Kardashev created a scale, the type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations. Type 1 is one that can manage its weather and creates their energy from natural resources. And that doesn't mean fossil fuels. That means sun, wind, water, and energy that's available, like Tesla did, right? And type 2 utilizes the energy of the solar system. Type 3 utilizes the energy of the galaxy.
Wow.
Now, on that level, we're probably maybe a 0.1, 0.2, because we do have some wind, water, solar types of technology available. We're trying to control the weather with HAARP. It's not a destructive thing. Chemtrails were originally designed to help protect us from cosmic rays. Now, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories around it, and some of them may be true because we didn't really check to see what the substances might do lingering in the atmosphere, right? They were just trying to protect us. And as with any science or minds that haven't advanced enough to really have that, okay, let's study it for a while and look at what might happen, right? So you have unintended consequences. And sometimes they can be catastrophic, right? But the intention is not to control people or have those filaments get in your mind so that they use mind control stuff. That's not it at all.
Yeah.
Right. So there is, even with the pandemic and the fallacious narrative that's happening with it, the intention is to really try to help humanity, even though the ways they're doing it seems rather barbaric, right? But this is the history of how populations have been manipulated. Howard Bloom wrote a great book called The Lucifer Principle. It's not about Lucifer. It is about how the scientific study of how a few people have manipulated masses throughout history by telling the same story, outright lies, over and over and over again until it's believed to be true. And so when you have a managed medium and media that delivers this message to unsuspecting people who want to believe, because they want to trust, that's our natural inclinations. We want to trust. And so, because we don't want to take responsibility, right? So we want to believe what other people are telling us and follow that. And many have, bless their hearts, some to their detriment already. So we have to see this. Klaus Schwab wrote a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. And in that he asked two questions. Can we be caring and compassionate toward each other coming out of COVID? And can businesses be agile in how they need to shift? Well, here and again, even with this disparity between populations and the masks and non-masks, the vax and non-vax and all that kind of stuff, we still have to learn to get along.
Exactly.
Right? So those things cannot get in the way of our ability to negotiate a better life with each other. Right? So we have that capability.
Looking at everything that you're discussing today, from being an experiencer and having the actual contact yourself and knowing that that was something that you've encountered your whole life, and just having all the trials and tribulations that you've talked about. And I kind of inside myself, laughed a little bit when I heard that. Say this: if they're looking at you to help to create or bring about or facilitate a new world order, wouldn't they want to give you less of a rocky road between point A and point B to help you facilitate that? I'm making a joke. Of course, the universe knows.
Yeah. And I get pissed off at sometimes. I argue with them. It's like, come on, guys. However, it's the challenge to change. Right? And that has some significance. I'll take that a little further. So the challenge to change only has 3 letters difference, the LLE. And this came up in my second master's degree for organizational management. And study team was using that, and they didn't have anything for the LLE. And I piped up, liabilities, limitations, and excuses. right? So as long as we consider those things, and those are all personal, we tend to project all that stuff, or, and when you deal with those liabilities, limitations, and excuses on a personal level, and you transcend those, then you really learn something. But you can't if you don't have the challenges.
How did you get involved with Jeffrey Mishlove?
That's an exciting story. In 1990, I started a TV show called One World. And I asked a lot of different people from all walks of life how they got where they were at, what fears they encountered, how they dealt with things from both inner and outer perspectives, how they saw the similarities in the people around them, things like that. And I had two people that I wanted to emulate. Jeffrey Mishlove was one of them. Bill Moyers was the other. And I hoped that someday that I would be worthy of an interview. Oh, I'm not worthy. So I hope someday I'd be worthy of an interview with one of them. Well, in 2018, one of the websites I manage, I curate Ufology Press, but there's an ancillary blog attached to that has a voicemail message, the only contact method on it. So, and I had none to date. So I get this voicemail message. I recognize the voice. It's Jeffrey's, and my heart just starts pattering, right? And he says, hey, I just did an interview with Jason Giorgiani about the Greys, and I think your audience might enjoy it. Would you please take a look and share it if you would? And so I did. I wrote a blog. I posted it along with the video and shared that link with him. And I sent a copy of this book, Stubbing My Toe on Purpose, with it. And 3 days later, I got an email back, hey, would you like to come talk about it?
Wow.
And so on August 11th and 12th, we were in Albuquerque. We drove up for it, and we did 2 conversations on the 11th and one on the 12th. They were about the New World Order. Now, these were his picks too, which I was really blessed that he did that. The New World Order was the first one. The sociology of ufology was the second one. And the third was on hearing voices, because we all hear them, right? And so he thought it was good. And from reading my book, and Jeffrey's got a speed reader and idyllic memory, so he pulled out a lot of things for reference so that we could talk openly about things. And I tend to be a blabbermouth. I'm open, I'm transparent. I'll talk about things to the best of my ability because I truly just want to share the experience, right? And my experience is the only truth that I have. And so in sharing that, hopefully, it's easier to be authentic in that place. So that's how that happened.
And just for our audience, in case they're not engrossed in ufology, Jeffrey Mishlove, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove is the host of New Thinking Aloud. It's a YouTube channel, is that right? Among other things.
Yeah.
And
he was a host for Thinking Aloud on PBS for 25 years or so. That's how I first learned of him. And he's got a doctorate in parapsychology from UC Berkeley, the only one that I'm aware of. And it took him 3 years to actually get it approved. And so he's talking to all these people, experiential styles and researchers, right? And they're talking about the plethora of topics within the parapsychology framework, from UFOs to remote viewing and everything in between.
I have to ask you this. When you think about, I'm an intuitive psychic medium. That's just my life, the way it lives. Like, you're an experiencer. We have the deck of cards we get. We learn what we have. We do what we can. What is your viewpoint? Because I've had close friends who are spiritual that are also intuitive tell me they think the whole starseed thing, that they think certain people who are intuitive might have connections to other sources of knowledge. And I wanted to ask you if you have any opinions about anything like that regarding paranormal type circumstances and the ability of one's mind to, say, for example, be intuitive and psychic beyond what traditional societal norms have been able to grasp. How someone can connect with the other side, for example, if you're a medium, or if you get paranormal stuff like premonitions, or you can read energy, or whatever it is. I wonder if you had any knowledge or any opinion about that and its connection to possible.
I always have opinion. And sometimes I have knowledge. So consider what I said earlier about cosmic consciousness condensing into form. All right. So that essentially we have that point of light, as I described those things earlier. So that point of light is within us. Now that point of light bounces back and forth between here and the great light, however many lifetimes, right? And so as we grow in our understanding and our experience, we become better connected, right? So, and through those trials and tribulations, we grow in understanding and then get to a point where we can actually be conscious helpers, volunteer, if you will, for accelerating consciousness in a community, in a city, nation, in a world, right? And so all of these, especially right now, there's this, it's like a collective messiah, if for lack of a better, because there are so many people, there's points of light maybe that I saw that I kind of felt like they were in or already in body, but maybe just, but I didn't have the awareness of it yet. So there's all of these people popping up now coming out of COVID that they're reaching out to each other, and they're starting groups, or they're continuing groups, and evolving to where they're really looking at, okay, how can we use our skill sets to better the world? And these are some that I'm connected with are really high level skill sets, right?
Sure.
And in this process, it also aligns with what Jose Arguelles had talked about in the segue between ages, the Piscean and the Aquarian age, in that 50-year window, he talked about there's this 25-year escalation of awareness and consciousness up to the solstice in 2012, winter solstice. And then you have a tipping point. Well, what happens after that? Well, the natural inclination, once you've become this, right, your life goes back into whatever you're doing. And so this new awareness and consciousness, or new living awareness, if you will, extends into your workplace, into your relationships, into everything around you. And you begin to connect with others through synchronistic, quantum entanglement experiences. And you recognize each other. You can be in a store, you get you just glance and you connect, eyes connect. It's like, oh, there's something there. Well, follow that, right? Don't just let it go, because that's usually what we do. But when there's an eye contact, that's soul to soul.
Right? Do you think that might be something like soul contracts or soulmates or any of those kind of things, that you think that those are also intertwined?
I think they are. And that's, one of the things that the Ashtar Command is about. And that group has been bandying about for a while. And there's pros and cons as to how that's viewed. From my perspective, I was introduced to it in my late 20s and have been said that I'll even, and this has been said by others, and I can't say it doesn't resonate. I'm supposed to be the son of Ashtar and Athena. So who are the commanders of the Ashtar Command? Well, they're at such a level of intelligence and consciousness that they basically kind of oversee those who have advanced to the point that are here for purpose, that have a perfected form, fit, and function in the world that they are aware of, right? And so the universe is interconnected, and there's all kinds of networks in it. We just don't understand all those networks yet. We barely understand that we've got a holistic system of several networks in our body.
Interesting you're saying this, right? And I'm just thinking of myself in my own life right now. In the last few months, I've noticed overlapping synchronicities in my life leading me in certain directions. My podcast going one way, and personal relationships and friendships going a certain way, and things that I've manifested are happening faster than I expected. And I think that has to do with the cosmic consciousness that you're talking about. I feel like those
even more so, it has to do with what you're giving attention, with intention and interaction. right? It's the law of attraction on steroids.
That's what I was about to tell you, is that I feel like the law of attraction in my life has been on steroids, in the sense that if
I knew that. I'm a little psychic too.
I know you're not just a little psychic. Let's be honest with each other here.
All right.
I know you're intuitive, and I know you're very much open because of your experiences, especially near-death experiences. I feel like they open us up. They make us spiritual. We have an awakening. We're informed. So, interesting as that is, I think that we're in a renaissance right now. And I think we may have talked about that. I think spiritually we're in a renaissance. And I believe that the spiritual component of our lives, it's coinciding with us knowing more about UFOs and advanced intelligent life. And ourselves, because it's not separate. Everything happens in sequence, right? It's what they call it, contiguous. Yes.
Right. So that means that everything, multiple layers happening simultaneously. Right. It's like a construction project. One of the hats I wear is I do partnering workshops for building road and bridge. Right. And here's a guy with as far out as what you've heard me talk about, doing some very concrete, literally things. Right. And I'm well respected in that industry. And yet there's these applications of intelligence and protocols, processes, patterns, form, fit, function, strategies. All of these kinds of things work ubiquitously. You've just got to understand that it's all built that way, and you find it everywhere.
Let me ask you this. I'm gonna pick your brain for a minute.
Okay.
How many books have you written to date on this topic of ufology and higher consciousness and synchronicities? And I see them behind you. If anyone's watching the video, they can see a plethora.
17, 18.
In 18 books, let's say.
I have some a little more on the business side, like I read a LinkedIn workbook back in 2014. I have some transformational coaching books that don't get into that. I have some that a little, actually, I think all of them has some inkling, or at least mention or something like that, because it's all connected. And so how can I
want to peel back the onion for a minute? You've written a lot. You've done a lot. I want to peel back for my audience. If I peel back the onion of your thought processes, because this is not going to be easy, but I just want to ask this anyway and see what we get. If we peel back the onion, based on all your experiences, all your wealth of knowledge, your wealth of intelligence, high analytical abilities, I sense all that about you. If someone in the audience is thinking to themselves, okay, I get it. I've heard about these UFO disclosure projects. I've heard about other life out there. I understand there's so much money being wasted trying to find out where we are with that. And if you were to answer that question to a person in a simplistic way so that they could understand it, basically a soundbite. If you took your 18 books and put it into a soundbite about alien life and how we should understand our role in the universe, what would you say to that person?
Life forms beyond our physicality are complementary. They are there to support our evolution. Our choices are what make the difference. We can either be afraid of it or embrace it. If you're going to be afraid of it, you're going to produce fearful events in your life, because that's how you're going to see it. If you're not afraid of it, the fearless side of things, and if you're truly a spiritual being, it's focused in love, unconditional love. So there is no fear, or ought not to be. And in that place, you see clearly. And so all of this kind of makes sense common, right? And to yourself. And I guess that's kind of it in a nutshell. Now,
so can I respond? I love the way you just couched that. And what I mean to say is, basically, any advanced life that comes to our planet, they're not here to hurt us.
Even a retired defense minister from Canada, Paul Hellyer, announced that years ago. They know there's no threat from space.
So if we take the threat away, like it's not like that.
And we have an economy that's threatened, because most of the economy on the planet is built around the military.
Well, we have the industrial military complex kind of
military industrial complex. And you can't believe how many jobs are tied to that. Right? So, and we don't think about that. We do feel that there's a way to redistribute that, or those dollars, towards productive things, and we could. However, that takes a massive upwising in this reset that calls for change and won't suffer any less.
Where do you see us on, let's say, 0 represents society unable to accept the realization that we are not alone, versus 10, we embrace it and our society evolves in the best direction possible because of it? Where do you see us going?
Let me answer that from probably a different perspective than you might be anticipating, although maybe not. One of the websites I manage is Independence, Arizona. And it's basically the Independent Party domain for Arizona. The Independent Party does not exist yet. So I've got all the things there to create it in a very simple, matter of fact, point and click kind of way. It's been up for almost a decade now. And there's not a lot of interest in it, right? And I have things up there about making sense common, about doing the right things educationally, environmentally, energetically, or energy production wise as well. So I don't think we're ready for it yet. We're still too fearful about what's happening, and we're not even concerned about our neighbors yet, right? We're living in cities with walled communities, and you're lucky to know your next door neighbors on either side, let alone the one behind you, and certainly not everybody on the block. Right.
So we've been bad neighbors. We're not even in the neighborhood yet. We're not even worthy of knowing.
Right. And so there really isn't a beautiful day in the neighborhood yet. Right. Fred was so right, so these are the kinds of things that offer evidence of our progression. And if we don't see these are practical and pragmatic examples, right? People may be thinking about these things. The action is where it comes in. We have to have actionable items on the agenda in order to fulfill the shift from profit over people and planet to people and planet over profit.
How do we do that?
And we're only so thinking about back to what Jose was talking about in the shift, right? So as we put this new consciousness and awareness or live this new living awareness in reality, everything that doesn't mix with it is going to come up for view. And especially right now, we see everything. It's so transparent that, even a blind person can see it, right? So recognizing that kind of also shows, all right, we've got some work to do, right? So it's not that it's impossible. It's totally possible. And one of the things that the people from elsewhere told Smith was that time is a measurement of the change of entropy. So think about a planet, that has less entropy, or a life, even an individual life that has less entropy. I can't tell you the shifts just in the last few years since I got remarried, and the shift in entropy in my life and what's come because of that.
Can you give an example of that for our audience when you say shift in entropy and the benefits, for example?
Okay, so entropy can be seen as, just being all stressed out over stuff, right? The chaos in your life and how to manage it, right? And so entropy is the theory that a system on its own will gradually decay into chaos, right? Now, I believe just the opposite. When you allow things and you aren't pushing and pulling your own agenda, unless it's a pure one, which basically when you show up authentically and empty, then you're available, right? And you can be vulnerable, and that's a strength, right? So when you're in that place, then everything around you shifts. It's like the way you see the world changes. The world doesn't change. How you see
your paradigm.
And so in actuality, the world does change because the way you're interacting with it changes, and the way it interacts with you is reciprocal. So instead of, the Michigas, right? So like when we first got together, my wife's a piano teacher, and she had just a few students. She was working for a music school. Within a year, we worked together on this. I built her website, Google business page, Facebook page, all that kind of stuff, right? Because that's another hat that I wear as I do web development. Within a year, she had 30 students and no longer working at the music school, making the same money per hour as she was at the music school, but she was only getting, like 60% of it from them. So that all changed. My income changed. I started getting jobs that would just pop in out of nowhere. And with the multiple hats I wear, I love diversity, right? I get bored easily when
I can tell by all the educational, I got a lot of education under my belt, and reading your intro earlier, I was like, wow, you've got a lot of broadband, a broad spectrum of education under your belt and a lot of
had opportunities and said, yeah.
I love it though.
Right.
You haven't cut yourself off from doing anything. You've embraced all possibilities.
Absolutely. And
it's a holistic Gestalt approach to opportunity.
Absolutely. And when you pay attention to what's in front of you, you're not looking at the horizon.
That's true.
Right. And most of us look at the horizon thinking, oh, someday maybe. Right. Instead of looking at, you got a goal. Now, as a business coach, this is what I work on. You start with the end in mind, right? And then you back it out and you figure, okay, what do I need to do every hour of the day in order to accomplish my goal? And then you set up a schedule and a plan and you work it. It's that simple.
I like the idea of coming into the quest of truth and unearthing the truth as part of the process of discovering not only ourselves and what's within ourselves, but we're a larger part of without, meaning outside Absolutely. Of ourselves.
And it's all a shared experience.
Well, you know what else I like too about talking to you today? I like the fact that you're able to talk to me and you're like, Jason, aliens exist. We are one. And guess what? They're not going to hurt us. The only thing that can hurt us is ourselves, our fear, our recalcitrance, our skepticism, our one-upper, we're better than you, us versus them, all those divisions that exist in society, like a cracked eggshell. Right. And what we really need to do to prepare ourselves for evolving as a planet is to bring ourselves together, amend.
You can't grow until you grow.
Exactly.
You can't fully love another until you fully love yourself. And, from those perspectives. So that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of things that going on in the world that aren't right? And that are destructive, that are fear-based and that are harmful. And it's not denying that, right? Those things happen. It's unfortunate. They happen. However, there's a way out.
And that's what I'm excited about tapping into. How do we get out of it? What do we need to do? You can tell my enthusiasm.
Yeah. And it's great. I love it. It'll be cool.
I just want to thank Zen for coming on the show today. And as I was saying during my interview with him today, this information is so amazing. And I think he's such an important guest to have on the show that I don't see this being one episode because of the breadth and just so much interesting things to unearth with each other. I think having Zen come back is one of those things that our audience is going to really benefit from because ufology is so important, but there's so much more than this. It's like peeling back the onion, as I said earlier. When you peel back the onion, you see there's so much more. It's like staring at the sun, but not seeing it for what it is. We need to take a real good critical evaluation of these issues, break them down further to facilitate discussions that can help us understand these issues better. Because I think the more we're able to really grasp these concepts, the better our society is going to be with not only dealing with each other, but dealing with the world itself. And so I welcome you to check out Zen's website. I'm going to have it in the show notes. I'm going to have Zen back on. And I'm just so excited to have the opportunity of presenting this material to you, this information to you in a way that I hope you have an open mind and keep interest. And just there'll be things you hear that you might think you don't believe yourself, but you know what? Most of the stuff, the earth used to be flat. We've changed our paradigms over thousands of years, millennia, and we continue to grow. And I think our evolution is so important. And so it's just one of those things we got to take into consideration. Change your viewpoint. Your mind should be a parachute. It should be open. It should be willing to change, willing to accept different points of view. And that's one of the things I really want to do with our show is present different points of view so that you can become better informed as our audience. So tune into this upcoming episode. We will have more with Zen on the show. I'm excited. And I just say, stay positive, because when you're positive, anything's possible. Thank you so much for tuning into the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Social Psychic Radio Show. Don't forget to join us for another episode next time. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes. You can also check us out on Facebook, and don't forget to visit the Social Psychic YouTube channel. Until next time, it's a big world out there. Keep an open mind, embrace your paradigms, and know that the universe is always yours to explore.